The void of space stretched endlessly before Jackson Slate's eyes, the blackness broken only by the occasional distant twinkle of stars. It was quiet, as space usually was, but the vast HFY Nebula in the distance was a different story. It was a place of swirling gases, unpredictable gravitational shifts, and electromagnetic storms that could fry a ship's systems in seconds. No one in their right mind went near it unless they were desperate or chasing a prize. Jackson was both. His ship, the Wraith, was an old, weathered salvage vessel, but it was fast and reliable, perfect for scouring derelict ships and forgotten space stations for valuable tech. The HFY Nebula, though dangerous, had a reputation for being full of treasure, the kind left behind by ships that didn't survive its chaotic pull. And Jackson, more often than not, found himself taking risks for the biggest payoffs. Today had been no different. The ship's sensors had detected something unusual inside the nebula, a faint distress signal from an old alien frequency. It was weak, intermittent, but it was enough to pique his interest. "Vex, how much longer before we hit the nebula's outer edge?" Jackson asked, glancing at the small, flickering screen displaying a map of the region. "Approximately 20 minutes, Captain," replied Vex, the ship's AI, in its characteristic calm and measured tone. "I would like to take this opportunity to remind you that entering the HFY Nebula is statistically unwise. There is a 68% chance we may suffer system failures and a 42% chance we will encounter I know, spare me the odds," Jackson cut in. "We've done worse. If by worse you mean narrowly escaping pirate ambushes, asteroid fields, and corrupt planetary authorities, then yes," Vex quipped, its voice adopting a hint of dry humor. "But those had fewer unknown variables than the nebula." Jackson smirked to himself, settling back in his seat. Vex always had a point, but the AI also knew him well enough to understand that once Jackson had his mind set on something, there was no changing it. As they approached the nebula's outer edge, the view outside the ship's cockpit transformed. The dark, star-strewn expanse of space gave way to swirling clouds of neon green, violet, and orange gas, like a living aurora that spanned across light years. Electrical storms flickered in the distance, sending crackling pulses through the vibrant haze. Jackson held his breath as the Wraith crossed the boundary into the nebula. Immediately, the ship's hull groaned in protest, and the lights flickered momentarily. The ship's shields hummed to life, compensating for the sudden pressure shifts and electromagnetic interference. Jackson's fingers danced over the controls, adjusting the stabilizers to keep them from being thrown off course. "Distress signal relocked, Captain," Vex reported. "It's coming from a derelict escape pod about 5 kilometers ahead. The signal is weak, but there's definitely life out there." "Good," Jackson muttered, eyes narrowing in concentration. He pushed the ship forward, navigating the thickening clouds of gas with practiced precision. As they closed in on the location, Jackson's sensors pinged again. This time, the lifeform readings were clearer. His eyes widened as he scanned the data. "That's no escape pod passenger," Jackson muttered. "Vex, what the hell am I looking at?" "It appears to be a biological entity of considerable size," Vex responded. "Approximately 25 meters long. Preliminary scans suggest a highly advanced alien species, likely one native to this region of space." And Vex hesitated. "And what?" Jackson asked, feeling the tension in the AI's response. "It appears to be in distress, Captain." Jackson squinted through the forward window, trying to spot the creature through the thick, multicolored gas clouds. And then he saw it, a massive, serpentine figure, its sleek body shimmering faintly with silver-blue bioluminescence. It was coiled tightly around a wrecked escape pod, which looked tiny in comparison to the creature. Jackson's heart skipped a beat. The creature was unlike anything he'd seen before. Its long, sinuous form seemed both graceful and terrifying, with smooth, scale-like plating that pulsed with an ethereal glow. But what struck him most was the way it moved, slow, sluggish, like it was struggling to breathe. Its side was marred with a deep, glowing wound. "Vex, magnify," Jackson ordered, leaning forward as the ship's cameras zoomed in. His breath caught in his throat. "It's hurt and pregnant." Sure enough, the creature's abdomen was swollen in a way that could only mean one thing. It was carrying offspring, and it wouldn't survive much longer if that wound wasn't treated. "Captain, I strongly advise against engaging," Vex warned. "This species is unknown. It could be dangerous. It's dying, Vex," Jackson interrupted. "And if it dies, those babies die with it. We can't just leave them out here. Given the high probability of personal harm. I'm doing it." Without another word, Jackson guided the wraith closer, landing it softly on a stable piece of debris. He quickly grabbed his medical kit and a plasma cutter from the ship's storage. As he stepped into his suit and helmet, Vex's voice came through his earpiece. "Be careful, Captain. Your reckless altruism is statistically admirable." Jackson grinned under his helmet, stepping out into the nebula. The electromagnetic storm crackled faintly around him, but his suit protected him from the worst of it. He floated gently toward the creature, his heart racing as he approached. The closer he got, the more immense the creature seemed. It was beautiful in a haunting, otherworldly way. Its glowing eyes, the size of dinner plates, blinked slowly as it watched him approach. There was no aggression in its gaze, just pain and exhaustion. "It's okay," Jackson murmured, more to himself than the creature. "I'm here to help." He activated the plasma cutter and began slicing through the debris that had impaled the creature's side. Its body flinched, but it didn't lash out. Jackson worked as quickly as he could, carefully pulling the shrapnel free. When the last piece came out, the creature let out a soft, warbling cry, its long body shuddering with relief. Jackson pulled out a healing patch from his medkit and applied it to the wound. The patch hissed as it adhered to the creature's skin, releasing a regenerative agent that would help close the wound. The creature's breathing steadied, its luminous eyes focusing on him. For a moment, Jackson stood there, staring at the massive alien, feeling a strange connection he couldn't explain. Then, with a soft, almost grateful trill, the creature curled protectively around the escape pod. Moments later, the faint glow of bioluminescent sacs inside the creature's abdomen began to brighten. Jackson's breath caught in his throat. The babies were coming. He floated backward, giving the creature space. Within minutes, the first of the hatchlings emerged, slick with a translucent membrane. Then a second. Both of them were smaller versions of their mother, their silver-blue scales gleaming with the same ethereal glow. They wriggled and coiled around the pod, their tiny eyes blinking open to the vastness of space. Jackson watched in awe as the hatchlings took their first breaths of life. The mother, now resting, looked at him one final time, her eyes full of something Jackson couldn't quite place. Gratitude, perhaps. He turned to leave, knowing that the creatures would need time to bond with each other. But as he started back toward his ship, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. And he was right. Jackson Slate had thought the adventure was over after saving the alien mother and helping her give birth, but he couldn't have been more wrong. The sight of those two hatchlings emerging from their mother's coiled body had been nothing short of miraculous, and Jackson had returned to his ship with a strange mix of pride and melancholy. He had done all he could for the creature, and now it was time to leave. But the universe had other plans. Back on the Wraith, Jackson sat at the ship's console, mentally preparing to depart the Shil-Nar Nebula. His suit helmet lay discarded next to him, and he ran a hand through his unruly dark hair, still trying to make sense of what he had just witnessed. "All right, Vex, start pre-flight checks," he said. "We need to get out of here before anything else goes sideways." "Pre-flight checks initiated, Captain," Vex replied smoothly. "All systems green, except for minor radiation exposure from the nebula. Shields compensated." "We are ready to dash." Suddenly, the ship's proximity alarm blared through the cockpit, interrupting Vex mid-sentence. Jackson's heart skipped a beat as he jumped to his feet. "What now?" he muttered, grabbing the control console. His eyes darted to the sensor readout, which showed two unidentified lifeforms moving rapidly toward the ship. "Unknown entities approaching," Captain Vex announced, confirming Jackson's fears. "I suggest we dash," but before Jackson could respond, a loud thud echoed through the hull. The ship rocked gently, as if something or someone had boarded. His hands flew to the weapons panel, ready to defend the Wraith from any number of space marauders or scavengers. "Seal the doors," Jackson ordered, his adrenaline spiking. "No one's getting in here without Dash," but then the security monitors flickered to life, displaying a feed from the ship's cargo bay. Jackson stared at the screen, and what he saw made his jaw drop. The two hatchlings. Somehow, the newborn alien creatures had found their way onto his ship. They slithered through the cargo bay's open hatch, their sleek, serpentine bodies glowing faintly with silver-blue bioluminescence. Their movements were fluid and graceful, despite being only hours old. They trilled softly as they explored the bay, their heads turning curiously as if they were searching for something or someone. Jackson's first instinct was to hit the emergency lockdown button, but something stopped him. These weren't mindless beasts. They had approached the ship, bypassed its defenses, and entered without causing any harm. And now, they were heading deeper inside. "Vex, did they just open the hatch?" Jackson asked, incredulous. "It appears so," Captain Vex confirmed. "I am detecting a faint energy signature coming from the hatchlings. It is possible they possess some form of telekinetic or electromagnetic ability." "Fascinating." "Fascinating?" Jackson muttered. "More like terrifying." He grabbed a plasma pistol from the wall, though he didn't really expect to use it. Whatever these creatures were, they didn't seem hostile. If anything, they seemed curious. With a deep breath, Jackson cautiously made his way down the narrow corridors of the Wraith, his heart racing with a mix of fear and fascination. When he reached the cargo bay, the hatchlings were waiting for him. They stood or rather hovered near the center of the bay, their long, fluid bodies suspended just above the metallic floor. Their wide, luminous eyes locked onto Jackson the moment he stepped inside, and he froze. He had never been face to face with creatures like this before, creatures that had been born just hours ago yet seemed so aware, so intelligent. One of the hatchlings let out a soft trill, its head tilting slightly as it regarded him. The other soon followed, coiling itself into a loose circle, as if waiting for Jackson to make the next move. "They've imprinted on me," Jackson whispered to himself, realization dawning on him. He'd heard of this phenomenon before in certain animal species where newborns bonded to the first living thing they saw. But these were no ordinary animals. These were highly intelligent alien life forms. His instincts told him to keep his distance, but his curiosity overruled his caution. Slowly, Jackson lowered his plasma pistol and took a step forward. The hatchlings responded immediately, their heads rising in unison. They seemed to sense his hesitation, trilling softly as if to reassure him. One of them slithered closer, its smooth, scaled body gliding silently across the floor. Jackson held his breath as the creature approached, its large eyes gazing up at him with an expression he could only describe as trust. It paused at his feet, and before he could react, the hatchling gently nudged his hand with its snout. A surge of warmth flooded through Jackson. He knelt down instinctively, reaching out with a trembling hand to touch the hatchling's head. Its skin was warm, almost alive with a faint hum of energy. The hatchling closed its eyes at his touch, a soft purring sound vibrating from its throat. The second hatchling followed suit, wrapping itself loosely around Jackson's arm as if it had been waiting for his acceptance. Jackson chuckled in disbelief, petting the smooth, iridescent scales of the creature now coiled around him. "They've chosen you, Captain," Vex observed from the ship's speakers, breaking the silence. "It seems they recognize you as their caretaker." "Great," Jackson muttered with a half-smile. "I've been adopted by space monsters." Despite his sarcasm, Jackson couldn't deny the strange sense of connection he felt with the hatchlings. They were not just mindless creatures, they were beings of immense power, and for some reason, they had bonded with him. As the moments passed, Jackson continued to examine the hatchlings. They were far more advanced than he had anticipated. Even though they had been born mere hours ago, they exhibited complex behaviors, understanding his touch, responding to his voice, and navigating his ship with ease. And then there was the matter of their abilities. "Vex," Jackson called, still petting the hatchling curled around his arm, "tell me more about that energy signature you detected earlier. What exactly are we dealing with?" "Based on the readings I've gathered, the hatchlings are generating low-level energy fields," Vex explained. "These fields appear to have electromagnetic properties, which might explain how they bypass the ship's security systems. I would hypothesize that, as they grow, these abilities could manifest in more advanced ways. They may possess the ability to manipulate energy and possibly control matter." "Control matter?" Jackson echoed, eyebrows raised. "You're telling me they could dash?" His words were cut off as one of the hatchlings demonstrated exactly what Vex had suggested. The air around the creature shimmered briefly, and suddenly, a small tool from Jackson's workbench lifted into the air, floating toward the hatchling. It held the tool in place with a faint energy pulse, then gently set it back down, as if it was showing off. Jackson stared in disbelief. "Well, that's impressive." "Indeed," Vex agreed. "I suggest further observation, but it is clear that the hatchlings view you as their protector. They are unlikely to harm you, Captain." Jackson let out a long breath, running a hand through his hair again. This was way beyond anything he had ever expected. He was a salvage pilot, not a babysitter for alien creatures with godlike powers. Still, as he watched the hatchlings playfully nudge each other, their glowing eyes never leaving him, Jackson felt something stirring within him. It wasn't fear or anxiety anymore, it was responsibility. These creatures had chosen him, and as crazy as it seemed, he couldn't abandon them. "All right, Vex," Jackson said finally, standing up. The hatchling slithered up to his sides, following his every movement. "Looks like I've got 2 new passengers. Let's figure out what to do with them." As he turned to leave the cargo bay, the hatchlings stayed close by, their soft trills filling the air. They were no longer just strange alien creatures, they were companions. And somehow, Jackson knew that their bond was only going to grow stronger. But he also knew this: creatures this powerful would attract attention. And not all of it would be good. The real danger was only just beginning. It had been a few days since the hatchlings had imprinted on Jackson, and things aboard the Wraith were anything but normal. The 2 alien creatures followed him everywhere he went, learning quickly and adapting to their surroundings with an intelligence that surprised even Jackson. They responded to his commands, communicated with soft trills and purrs, and occasionally displayed feats of telekinetic power, levitating small objects or generating protective energy fields. Jackson couldn't deny the growing bond he had with the hatchlings. But there was an uneasiness that lingered beneath the surface, a constant nagging thought that creatures this rare and powerful wouldn't stay hidden for long. That thought became a reality sooner than he expected. It started when Jackson received a transmission while making a supply run at the Valus Station, a remote outpost on the edge of known space. He'd just finished securing fuel and provisions when the comms crackled to life. "Unidentified ship Wraith, you are in violation of galactic salvage law. Prepare to be boarded by the authority of the Gathos Collective." Jackson's stomach dropped. He hadn't done anything illegal, at least not recently. But the Gathos Collective didn't care about legalities. They were notorious for targeting anyone they suspected of possessing valuable or rare assets, and if they knew about the hatchlings, it was game over. "Vex, scramble the transmission," Jackson said urgently, rushing back to the cockpit. "We're not sticking around for this." "Already on it, Captain," Vex replied, its voice tinged with tension. "I've disabled their ability to track us, but they are approaching fast." I recommend evasive maneuvers. Jackson's fingers danced over the controls, bringing the ship's engines to full power. The Wraith roared to life, blasting away from the station just as two sleek, black Gathos interceptors appeared on the sensors. The hatchlings, sensing Jackson's sudden spike in anxiety, appeared in the cockpit. Their large, luminous eyes blinked at him as if asking what was wrong. The larger one coiled itself around the base of Jackson's chair, while the smaller one perched on the console, watching the ships on the viewscreen with a keen intelligence. "We've got company," Jackson muttered, grimacing as the interceptors gained on them. "And not the friendly kind." The Gathos Collective was notorious for hunting down rare and valuable life forms, especially ones with the kind of abilities the hatchlings had already demonstrated. If they captured the creatures, they would likely be sold to the highest bidder, or worse, weaponized. Jackson's mind raced. He had no idea how they'd found him so quickly, but there wasn't time to dwell on it. His priority was getting the hatchlings to safety. "Vex, plot the fastest course out of here," Jackson ordered, pushing the Wraith into a sharp bank as the first of the interceptors fired a barrage of plasma bolts. The ship shook violently, but the shields held. Some were off the usual routes. "I've located a nearby asteroid field, Captain," Vex said. "It should provide temporary cover. I'll adjust the course." Jackson gritted his teeth and dove toward the asteroid field, his eyes darting to the rear sensor feed. The interceptors were relentless, closing in as they fired another volley of plasma bolts. The hatchlings let out anxious trills, sensing the danger. "Easy, guys," Jackson said through gritted teeth, tightening his grip on the controls. "We'll get out of this." As the Wraith approached the asteroid field, the space around them became a chaotic swirl of tumbling rocks and debris. Jackson navigated through the treacherous terrain with precision, twisting the ship through narrow gaps between massive chunks of rock. The interceptors followed, their sleek forms weaving through the obstacles with alarming speed. "They're not giving up," Jackson muttered, feeling the sweat bead on his forehead. He needed a new plan. Suddenly, one of the hatchlings, the smaller one, emitted a sharp trill and slithered up onto the console. Its silver-blue scales glowed brighter than before, and Jackson could feel the air around him hum with energy. Before he could react, the hatchling extended its body toward the viewscreen, and a shimmering field of energy began to form around the ship. "What the dash?" Jackson's eyes widened in shock as the field expanded, surrounding the Wraith in a protective bubble. The Gathos interceptors fired again, but this time, the plasma bolts splashed harmlessly against the energy shield, dissipating into nothing. "Captain, it seems the hatchlings are enhancing the ship's shields," Vex remarked with what sounded like genuine surprise. "Their abilities are far more advanced than I originally calculated." Jackson could only stare in disbelief as the hatchling maintained the shield with apparent ease. It was as if the creature had instinctively known what to do, reading the situation and acting to protect them all. The larger hatchling joined its sibling, reinforcing the field, and the ship sailed smoothly through the asteroid field, virtually untouchable. "I don't know how you two did that," Jackson said, glancing at the hatchlings, "but I owe you one." But their troubles were far from over. Even with the hatchling's shield, they couldn't stay in the asteroid field forever. The Gathos interceptors had pulled back temporarily, likely regrouping for another attack once the Wraith emerged. "Vex, any ideas on where we can hide?" Jackson asked, keeping a wary eye on the sensor readout. "There is an uninhabited moon in a nearby system," Vex suggested. "It's within range if we make a jump now. The moon's atmosphere is thick with ionized gases, which would disrupt most tracking systems." "Do it," Jackson said. "Plot the jump." The Wraith lurched as the FTL drive powered up. Within moments, the stars outside the cockpit stretched into long lines of light, and the ship vanished into hyperspace, leaving the Gathos interceptors far behind. Jackson collapsed into his chair, breathing heavily as the adrenaline began to wear off. The hatchlings curled up beside him, their glowing eyes watching him with what he could only describe as concern. He reached out and gently petted their heads, still amazed at how they had protected him and the ship. "You two really are something," Jackson said, his voice softer now. "I don't know where you came from, but I'm starting to think you were sent for a reason." The jump to the moon system didn't take long, and soon the Wraith emerged from hyperspace, approaching a barren, rocky world surrounded by swirling clouds of ionized gas. The atmosphere glowed faintly with electric blue light, giving the moon an otherworldly appearance. Jackson set the ship down on a flat plateau, hidden beneath a ridge of jagged rock formations. The moon was desolate, but for now, it offered safety. Once the ship was secure, Jackson leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes for a moment of peace. The hatchlings nestled against him, their warm bodies radiating a faint hum of energy. "You saved us back there," Jackson whispered, feeling an unexpected wave of gratitude. "I don't know what I would have done without you." But even as he rested, the weight of the situation pressed down on him. The Gathos Collective wasn't going to give up easily. They would regroup, send more ships, and spread the word that someone was harboring two incredibly rare and powerful creatures. And it wouldn't just be the Gathos after them. There were others, mercenaries, bounty hunters, and worse, who would stop at nothing to capture or kill the hatchlings for their abilities. Jackson knew that keeping them safe was going to be far more dangerous than he had ever anticipated. He opened his eyes, looking down at the hatchlings curled up beside him. Their soft trills filled the cockpit with a calming sound, and their glowing eyes blinked up at him with trust and affection. Jackson's jaw tightened with determination. He couldn't let them be taken, not after everything they'd been through together. "We'll figure this out," he said quietly, more to himself than to the creatures. "I don't know how, but we will." Outside, the storm clouds rumbled ominously over the moon's surface, casting long shadows across the barren landscape. The hunt was far from over. Jackson sat in the cockpit of the Wraith, staring out at the desolate, storm-ridden landscape of the moon. The hatchlings, now visibly larger and stronger, were coiled up nearby, their soft trills echoing through the ship's quiet interior. He had been on the run for weeks, evading the Gathos Collective, bounty hunters, and countless other threats, all while trying to figure out how to keep the hatchlings safe. But despite his best efforts, the danger was closing in. Jackson's fingers tapped nervously on the console as he rechecked the ship's long-range sensors. The atmosphere of the moon provided some temporary cover, but the Gathos weren't fools. They'd find him eventually. He just needed a plan, a way to end this chase once and for all. "Vex, any sign of activity in the system?" he asked. "Negative, Captain," Vex responded. "However, given the increasing frequency of the Collective's patrols, it is only a matter of time before they triangulate our location." Jackson cursed under his breath. "We can't keep running. We need a real solution." Before Vex could respond, an unexpected transmission came through. It was a signal unlike any Jackson had seen before, broadcasting on an ancient frequency used by only the oldest civilizations. The message wasn't hostile or demanding, it was an invitation. "Captain, the transmission is coming from deep space, originating in an uncharted region beyond the rim of known space," Vex announced, its voice tinged with intrigue. "It appears to be directed specifically at you and the hatchlings." Jackson's eyes narrowed. "Who the hell knows we're here?" "The signal carries the identifier of an ancient species, known as the Ankari," Vex continued. "According to historical records, they are an advanced race of protectors, believed to be guardians of rare and powerful life forms. It is possible they have been monitoring the hatchlings' development." Jackson's heart raced. The Ankari, he'd heard rumors of them, stories whispered in spaceports about a long-lost civilization that preserved balance in the galaxy. If they were real, and if they were offering sanctuary, this could be the solution he desperately needed. "Set a course," Jackson ordered. "I don't trust this, but it's our best shot. Let's see what they want." The hatchlings, sensing his decision, raised their heads and trilled softly. Their bodies glowed faintly, as if they, too, understood that something profound was about to happen. The Wraith hurtled through hyperspace, racing toward the uncharted system where the Ankari were waiting. The journey took hours, but the time felt like an eternity to Jackson. His mind buzzed with questions. Who were the Ankari? Why had they taken an interest in the Hatchlings? And most importantly, could he trust them? As the ship approached the coordinates, the space outside the viewscreen transformed. The stars gave way to a swirling vortex of colors: violets, greens, and blues, an ethereal gateway leading into a region of space that defied all known maps. It was like entering another dimension, a place untouched by the conflicts and chaos of the galaxy. There it is, Vex said, its voice quieter than usual, as if even the AI was in awe of what lay ahead. Jackson's eyes widened as a massive, crystalline planet came into view. Zython Prime, Vex called it. The surface was covered in towering spires of luminescent crystals, casting a soft glow across the atmosphere. Strange alien flora, shimmering in shades of purple and gold, covered the planet's landscape. The sight was breathtaking, and immediately, Jackson could feel the difference in the air. This was a place of immense power. The hatchlings stirred beside him, their bodies glowing more intensely as they neared the planet. Their trills grew louder, and Jackson could sense their excitement, no, more than that, their connection to this place. It was as if they were drawn here by something deeper, something primal. I'm reading intense energy signatures from the surface, Vex reported. The planet is saturated with an unknown form of energy, unlike anything we've encountered before. It appears to resonate with the hatchlings. Jackson set the ship down on a vast plateau made of crystal, and the moment the landing gear touched the surface, the entire ship hummed with energy. It was as if the planet itself was alive, welcoming them. Jackson hesitated for a moment, then stood up, grabbing his gear. Let's go see what the Ankari want. The hatchling slithered to his side, their glowing eyes full of curiosity and anticipation. Together, they exited the Wraith and stepped onto the surface of Zython Prime. The air was cool and heavy with a strange, invigorating charge. Jackson could feel the energy pulsing through his body, making the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. As they ventured deeper into the crystalline landscape, a group of beings appeared before them, seemingly materializing out of thin air. The Ankari. They were unlike any species Jackson had ever seen. Tall, slender figures composed of pure light and energy, their forms constantly shifting and pulsing with soft hues of blue and gold. Their faces were indistinct, featureless, but their presence radiated wisdom and power. You have come, one of the Ankari spoke, its voice a harmonious blend of tones that resonated in Jackson's mind rather than his ears. We have been waiting for you and the hatchlings. Jackson stepped forward, wary but determined. Who are you, and what do you want with them? The Ankari regarded the hatchlings with something akin to reverence. We are the protectors of balance in the galaxy, guardians of life's most powerful and sacred forms. The hatchlings you have nurtured are of an ancient lineage, beings destined to become protectors themselves, creatures of great power who will bring balance to the universe. Jackson blinked, trying to process what he was hearing. Protectors? Balance? I didn't sign up for any of this. I was just trying to keep them safe. And you have succeeded, the Ankari said, their glowing forms shimmering. But their time with you is coming to an end. They have grown under your care, and now they are ready to ascend to their true purpose. The words hit Jackson like a punch to the gut. He looked down at the hatchlings, who were now practically humming with energy, their bodies glowing brighter than ever before. They gazed up at him with those same trusting eyes, but something was different. They were changing, evolving. They're not ready, Jackson protested, his voice breaking slightly. They still need me. The Ankari's voice softened. They have imprinted on you, and your bond has allowed them to survive and grow. But now, they must take the next step in their evolution. They will not forget you, Jackson Slate, but their destiny is beyond your world. Jackson clenched his fists, feeling the weight of the moment. He had saved them, raised them, and now he was being asked to let them go. The thought of losing them felt unbearable, like losing a part of himself. One of the hatchlings, sensing his inner turmoil, slithered closer and nuzzled his hand, its warmth radiating through him. The other followed suit, wrapping gently around his arm, their soft trills filling the air with a sense of calm and reassurance. Jackson knelt down, resting his hands on their smooth, glowing bodies. "I'm gonna miss you too," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "But if this is what you're meant for, then go. Be everything you're supposed to be." The hatchlings let out a long, melodic trill, as if saying their goodbyes. And then, in a dazzling display of light and energy, they began to ascend. Their bodies shimmered and pulsed with power, and Jackson could feel the planet's energy surging through them. As they rose into the sky, the Ankari watched silently, their glowing forms standing in quiet reverence. The hatchlings' forms became pure energy, merging with the currents of the planet, until they were nothing more than brilliant streaks of light in the sky. Jackson stood there, staring up at the sky, his heart heavy but full of pride. They were gone, but he knew they were where they were meant to be. The Ankari turned to him, their voices a chorus of gratitude. "Your bond with them was vital to their survival, Jackson Slate. And in return, they have left you with a gift." Jackson looked down at his hands, which now glowed faintly with the same ethereal light as the hatchlings. He could feel their energy coursing through him, their power now a part of him. "You are their legacy," the Ankari said. "And through you, their purpose will endure." As the Ankari vanished into the crystal landscape, Jackson stood alone, the quiet hum of the planet filling the air. The hatchlings were gone, but their presence lingered within him. He wasn't the same person who had started this journey, and now, with their power flowing through him, he knew his story was far from over. He turned back toward the wraith, feeling a strange sense of peace, and whispered to the stars, "Thank you."